My name is Lynette Liu. I'm in the marketing and product management group at Outright. And I also have Laura Uribari here, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Uribari, as Lynette said, and I'm on the marketing side at Outright, and we're excited to have our first Getting Started with Outright webinar. So this is kind of a test run for us, so we appreciate your feedback and patience as we go through, but really trying to make it easier for folks to get started with Outright and make sure you get the most out of the product as you run your business.
Great. So to set your expectations on what we're going to be doing during this webinar, first, it's going to be very hands-on. So I'll be logged into a live on Outright, and I'll step through some of the steps that you would need to take as a new user of Outright, and then show you how Outright can eliminate a lot of the manual and tedious bookkeeping tasks that you would normally do by hand if you didn't have a software package like Outright. And then I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So I am going to go ahead and actually ask a couple poll questions first so I can understand you guys, the attendees, a little better. Let me do that. So the first question should be up on your screen right now. And if you could go ahead and answer that, and let me wait for the responses to come in. Okay, great. It looks like most of you have voted. I'm going to close the poll. And it looks like for this question, how long have you been running your own business? Most people, 27% less than 3 months, 18% less than 6 months, which is 45% of the people. And then there's also a pretty big group that is more than 2 years, 36%. So that's great. And then another question I'd like to ask is this one. So how do you currently keep track of your business finances? And please go ahead and vote. Okay, great. So let me go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like 17% responded a software like QuickBooks or another type of software. 33% use a spreadsheet. 42% use a box of receipts. And 8%, yikes, I don't keep track. And so the good news is it looks like definitely for the people that have software and spreadsheet will show Outright. So I think you'll understand a lot of the similar concepts, especially compared to people that use a spreadsheet. Outright can automate a lot of the tasks that you have to do maybe a little more manually via a spreadsheet. And then, of course, people who use a box of receipts, there's definitely a lot of automation and time savings that Outright can provide for you. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. I believe most of you are pretty new to Outright itself. You've created an account. But if you want to go ahead and log into your Outright account and then follow along with your own account, that would be great. Otherwise, feel free to look at what I'm doing on the screen here. And if you don't remember how to get to the login screen, you can go to outright.com. And then there should be a login button in the top right corner. You click on that, and then you're able to enter your login credentials. Oh, except for eBay users, if you signed up for Outright through eBay, then you would log into your eBay account and go to your applications and then log in, connect to Outright through that area. Okay. so right now I am on the first page of Outright when you first log in. We also call this the dashboard. And this is an account that already has some pre-populated data into it, but you would get to this state once you have connected a couple accounts. But I'm logging into this particular account because it helps me illustrate some of the features or the benefits that Outright can provide to you. So first of all, on the dashboard, with some of your business accounts connected, you'll see this profit and loss area. It gives you a snapshot for this time period, in which case I've selected the year 2013, a summary of your income and expenses by month. And the way I get to this data is through one of the main benefits of Outright, which is if you have transactions related to your business spread across a couple of accounts. For example, you're an Amazon seller, so you may have transactions in your Amazon seller account. Or if you're an eBay seller, you have transactions in your eBay seller account. Then you may also use PayPal for both paying and receiving payments, in which case you have transactions there. You may have a credit card account where you purchase goods or services related to your account. You may have a bank account which you use to receive check payments for sales related to your business. So right now, if you use multiple accounts for your business, you need to log into each of those accounts, pull the transactions, and then consolidate all those transactions in order to see what is really happening with your business. And that can be a pretty tedious thing to do. So one of the main benefits of Outright is that you can say, these particular 4 accounts are all related to my business, and then you can link them to Outright, and then on a nightly basis, Outright connects with those accounts, pulls the latest transactions so that when you log in the morning, you can see what your latest transactions are from all of those accounts: Amazon, eBay, PayPal, credit card, bank account, etc. So in this particular example, in this particular account, I have these accounts linked. So I have a PayPal account, a checking account, and that's it. And then, so what this will provide me is it will provide me the ability to look at all the income transactions, which you see right here. Okay. And then, okay, I understand the income tab is still coming up, so let me give it a couple seconds. Okay, and so you can see here, this is a list of all the transactions that were considered income transactions from the checking account and the PayPal account that I have linked to this particular Outright account. And historically, it will go back as far as my bank and my PayPal account can provide me data. And then on the expenses side, I'm going to click now on the expenses tab and wait for that to come up for you. Looks like there's a couple second delay between when I see it on my screen and when you see it through the webinar. Okay, so now on the expenses side, these are all the transactions that have been categorized as expenses through my bank account or my checking account and my PayPal account, and then you'll see them listed here. And then once I have all my income and expenses, of course, I can go through and Outright can go through and deliver a lot of interesting information so you can check on the health of your business. And we'll go into more detail on that. But since most of you probably do not have an account linked yet, and so have not gotten to this state, I'm going to first go into this linked accounts area and show you how you would actually link an account. So as you can see here, I do have a wealth. Oh, okay, let me wait a little while until the screen refreshes for you. Okay, so this is the list of accounts I have linked to Outright. I have an Etsy account, I have a Wells Fargo account, a PayPal account, and a Chase credit card account. Okay, so let's say I also am an eBay seller, or I also have a Bank of America account or some other accounts which has transactions associated with my business. I can just click on the Add an Account button. I'll wait for that screen to come up, and then you'll see that there's a link of commonly used bank or credit card accounts, as well as a list of commonly used e-commerce and invoicing accounts. If you don't see your financial institution in this list, you can scroll down a little to the search box and then enter the name of your particular bank in here and then click search. I'm not going to do that in this example. I'm going to go through the example of what it's like to connect an eBay account, but the process of connecting any account will be very similar to the one that I'm going to show here. So for my example, I'm going to click on eBay, and it actually turns out there's two different eBay or matches for the word eBay, in which case I'm going to choose eBay V2, which is just the name that must be encoded with eBay. And then I'm going to click on, once that comes up for you, click on the Link Your Account button. And then here I will be logging in with my credentials for my eBay account. And this is important because I am essentially giving permission to Outright to create a read-only connection to my eBay account. And when I say read-only connection, that means Outright has the ability to go in and do a one-way pull of data from eBay into Outright. Outright will never have the ability to go the other way, namely go back into your eBay account and make modifications to your data, because that's not something that Outright would need to do, and so we're just not creating that kind of connection. So here I'll enter my eBay user ID and password. Okay, and then I'll get to this screen, which is an eBay screen, just asking me if I am agreeing to allow Outright to pull data from my eBay account. And you'll see a very similar screen for any of the financial institutions that you want to connect to Outright. So I'll click on I agree. And after that operation is complete, I'm taken back to the linked accounts page. Okay, so now you will see eBay at the top of your list of all your linked accounts. It says last updated less than a minute ago. So I personally don't have activity in eBay, but so you'll see that the total is 0. But for those who actually do have activity in their eBay seller account, you will see this number updated, or you'll see a message here saying that it's currently refreshing. And the amount of time it takes to refresh really depends on how much data is being pulled from this particular account. So I can also keep scrolling, and I'll see the last update time for each of the accounts. So this is the last time that Outright went into each of these accounts and pulled the latest transactions. For Etsy, it was about 12 hours ago. For Wells Fargo, oh, it looks like my password may have expired, or I may have changed it. So it was last updated 2 months ago. And then similarly for the other accounts that are in the list. If at any time you want to get the data without waiting for the nightly refresh, you can always go to that particular account, and to the very right, there's a refresh link that you can click, and then it'll make that connection with that account and pull in all the transactions as of that particular time when you clicked refresh. And at this time, I want to go over to this page right here, which is a page on our customer care site. Okay, and I'll wait till that page refreshes on your screen. Okay, so this is a page from on our support site, and this tells you for each of the account types how much historical data Outright has access to. And these limitations are actually based on what the bank or the financial institution provides. So for example, first one says eBay, historical is 90 days. So that means if I connected my eBay account today, Outright would be able to go and pull the last 90 days of eBay data into Outright. And now going forward, that 90 days worth of historical data is stored in Outright, so that if I keep my Outright account open for the next 2 years, I'm actually going to have 2 years and 90 days worth of data. Similarly, for the other types of accounts, you'll be able to see what the historical amount of data that can be pulled is. If you need more data than this, there are ways to export it from your financial institution. Most financial institutions provide some way for you to export data into a format which can then be read and imported into Outright. Okay, so now let me go back to Outright, and I'll wait for that to refresh on your screen. Okay, and then, so based on the data that's been pulled into Outright for all these accounts I've linked, I can now get a picture of what's happening with my business. So first I'll go into the Income tab, and we've quickly looked at this before. I'll wait for that to refresh onto your screen. Okay, so you can see all these income transactions are transactions that were either automatically pulled by Outright, or if, for example, you've paid for something with cash or through one of the accounts that are not linked to Outright, you can also manually add a transaction by clicking on the Add Transaction button there on the top right. And then you'll be able to enter some information related to it, including name, a description, a category, and an amount. So let me put in let's say I purchased some office supplies from Laura's Office Supplies, and it's printer toner, and for this, it's an expense. So, whoops, oh, I'm in the Income tab. So let's say it's actually a customer. So Laura, customer, and she bought 10 lamps from me. I want to say their sales. They were worth $20 each, so that's a sale of $200. And then I can click Save. It will appear shortly on your screen. Okay, and if you look below that blue box, you'll see this new transaction from today, June 5th. Laura, customer, 10 lamps for $200. And you can look at your sales for different periods of time by changing the fields at the top, the date fields. Okay, you can also choose to look at income just from certain accounts by choosing something from the All Accounts drop-down. You can choose only to look at certain categories of sales or income, or you can specifically search for something. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to the Expenses tab, which it can be a little more interesting because there's more variation in what kind of expenses there are. And I'll wait for it to come up on your screen. Okay, so very similar to what you saw in the Income tab, except these are expense transactions. So it's the same thing where at the top you can select from different time periods, select just a specific account, select a specific category, or search on a name. You can also add a transaction manually, as we did for the Income. I'm not going to go do that because it's very similar. But what's interesting here is that I see a whole list of expenses that have been pulled in from PayPal, Wells Fargo, the Chase credit card, eBay, all that complete list of accounts that we saw earlier were attached to this Outright account. And for most of them, they will have been automatically assigned a category by Outright. So in this case, the first one says CVS Pharmacy, and its category is benefits. Outright has some algorithms in place that, based on data that's sent over by your financial institution, allow us to automatically assign a category. But in some cases, like, for example, Chevron gas station, you may have gone there for gas, or you may have gone there for repairs to your car, in which case they may be categorized into different areas for tax purposes. And so Outright will do one of two things in that situation. It will either leave something uncategorized, or it'll choose something which makes the most sense based on the algorithms that are in place. And if, as you're looking through this, it doesn't make sense to you, it's the wrong category, you can always go through and recategorize this. So for CVS Pharmacy, it's currently a benefit, but let's say I want to put that as, what is that? As personal, because this is something that is not really related to my business and is therefore something I want to assign as personal. Okay, so I've selected personal expense, and then you'll see here that this yellow box pops up, and it asks me, do I want to categorize all future transactions from CVS Pharmacy as a personal expense? And this allows me to teach Outright to do smarter categorization based on what I need. So if I agree that all transactions from CVS Pharmacy are not business related and they all should be personal expenses in the future, then I can check this box and then therefore teach Outright to do this automatically for me going forward. So I'm going to save this. Oh, the other thing that's interesting before I save is you'll see to the left of this yellow box this attach functionality, and this is something that was relatively new. So you can click to attach a photo of a receipt or some other photo that you might want associated with that transaction so that you can go back to it and look at it in the future. And this is really useful, especially with mileage receipts or even for transactions for an account that you rarely use for your business. For that particular case, you did use that credit card for a business expense, and so you want a record of that receipt associated with the transaction. Okay, so now I'm going to click Save. Okay, so now I'm going to go back here, and I'll wait for it to refresh on your screen. You'll see, once it does, that CVS Pharmacy is now categorized under personal. And what that means is that will now be removed from your profit and loss report. Because if something is not an expense related to your business, it should not be deducted or subtracted out from your business income. So it will no longer be part of your business or part of your business profit and loss. And this is particularly useful if you mingle personal and business transactions. Let's say with your credit card, you use your credit card both to purchase things for your business as well as just to purchase things for personal use. So because Outright is pulling all those transactions in, this is a way to indicate which ones are for your business and which ones are not. And you'll see a list of all the non-business ones by clicking on the non-business tab here under expenses. Okay, so we've been talking about reports, so let's move quickly over to that tab. And while we're waiting for that screen to come up, I'm going to check to see if there are any questions. Okay, it looks like there's a question about, you may cover this later, but can you print checks from Outright? And the answer is, unfortunately, no, you cannot. Outright is primarily a tracking tool. It's not one for, it's not transactional. Yeah, it's, that's right. So what Laura added is that it's not transactional. You cannot write or make payments from Outright. Okay, so now back to the Outright screen. You should be on the Reports tab, and you'll see at the top here a list of the available reports in Outright. Profit and loss, we talked about a little bit earlier. Okay, so here you can choose from the time period you want to look at. So in this case, the default is, okay, is July 2013, and I'm viewing by month. So historically, for the data I have, let me look at it by month all the way up until July 2013. And then I get a quick summary, and I can hover over the green bars, which represent the income, and to get an amount, and then hover over the orange bars, which represent expenses, to get the amount of expenses for that month. If I want the actual figures themselves, I can go to the top right there and click on Table. And as soon as that refreshes, you'll see that that is, for people who like numbers, These are the actual figures for income during each of those months. And what's nice about this is I can go to any of these time periods. So I'm hovering over March 2013 total income, $57,134.08. And you'll see it's actually a hyperlink. And if I click on it, it's going to go to the income tab and then give me the breakdown of what made up that $57,134.08. Yep. So I can, if something just doesn't sound right, or I just want to make sure that certain transactions were captured, this is an easy way for me to click through a particular number and get to what made up the components of that number. Oh yes, and then the other thing to mention on this page is that you'll see that the second line item here on March 31st is from Old Hippie Clothes was actually a return. So you'll also see that put into the income, categorized as an income, but as a return, so it's a negative amount to income. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to reports. And there does seem to be a delay between when I click on something and see it on my screen and when you do. And since you all have Outright accounts, I think you'll be able to go through and just look at the details of what's on these reports yourself. So I'm going to move on to taxes, which is one of the other big time savings that Outright provides. And I want to give the caveat here that the taxes information you're going to see now is part of the Outright Plus product, not the the Tier 1 or Outright Free product. So you may not necessarily see this if you don't have Outright Plus, but I do want to show it to you because it is a very interesting benefit of Outright should you choose to use Outright to help prepare your taxes. So you and Outright have done all this work of pulling in all your business transactions, making sure the categories are in the right categories that make sense to you, both from from the perspective of how you want to run your business, but also from the perspective of the IRS categories in the Schedule C. So let me actually bring up a poll at this time. And just figure out from the attendees, how did you report your business income this past tax year? Okay. I'll give it a couple more seconds. Make sure everyone had a chance to vote. And then I'm going to close the poll. Okay, so 57% of you filed as a sole proprietor, and then the other 43% of the respondents filed as a corporation. So particularly for the businesses that filed as a sole proprietor, meaning you attach the Schedule C to your 1040, Outright has a direct linkage to the Schedule C. So you've seen the income transactions, you've seen examples of expense transactions and how we were able to apply categories to those. Those categories are links to specific categories within the Schedule C. And so when you go into the Taxes tab, you'll be able to, and I'm going to jump directly to the Schedule C worksheet. taking a little bit for it to refresh onto your screens. Okay, so on this Schedule C worksheet for the year 2012, which is the year that I want to report my taxes for, I'll see a summary of my income, and then these line items you see here, gross receipts, returns, and allowances, and so forth, those are the exact line items that appear on your Schedule C for income. And then if you scroll a little lower to where it says Part 2 Expenses, and I'll wait for that to refresh. Okay, so I think you can already see the top of that, but it's the same concept as for the income section, which is that you'll see the expenses in Outright and how they break out into the exact categories that are in the Schedule C worksheet. And what's useful about this is I can look through this and say, advertising, it's currently at 0, but I know I spent money on advertising. And so the reason why you have nothing under advertising is it was probably not categorized under advertising. And so this can give you the cue to go back and recategorize those as advertising expenses. And once the Schedule C worksheet looks like a good reflection of what you did for your business, then what a lot of Outright customers do is they print this out and take it to their accountant and then to do their taxes, and it just becomes much easier than trying to add things via a spreadsheet or to sort through a box of receipts, and everything is just done for you as the year is progressing, as you're running your business. So when tax time comes around, it's just a matter of generating this report and handing it to your accountant. Okay, with that in mind, we have 20 minutes left, so I did see that there are several questions that came in, so let me go to those. Oh, yes, okay. Before we do that, Laura just reminded me that something that would be interesting to look at also is, so a reason you may have nothing under advertising, for example, is there was an expense that came in and it was not categorized under advertising, and in fact it may have been not categorized at all because Outright could not figure out a reasonable category for it. And in that case, Outright will apply the category uncategorized. And so when we're back in the Expenses tab, you'll see that the second sub-tab from the left says uncategorized. There's 363 of those. And normally you would not see this many. It's because this is a test account, so we haven't been really looking at all the transactions that have been pulled in. But here you'll see, once the data comes up for you, a list of all the transactions that are in the category uncategorized. And so what I can do here is I can say, okay, well, for the first one, Page's Coffee Bar, that actually should be either a personal expense because all those coffee visits I did had nothing to do with my business, or maybe another reasonable one is something for meals and entertainment. So in this case, I'm going to choose meals and entertainment. And you'll see again that yellow box asking me if I want all existing Page's Coffee Bar transactions to be categorized as meals and entertainment, or as well as future transactions from Page's Coffee Bar to be categorized as meals and entertainment. If I do, I can check box it and then click Save. And that's a big time savings, because now I don't have to individually go back to all the past transactions and recategorize them, and then all future ones will be automatically categorized to meals and entertainment for me. And so what will happen now when I go into my reports is that in the Schedule C report under the meals and entertainment category, this particular transaction, as well as anything else that's has been newly recategorized as meals and entertainment, will appear in that line item. Okay, so now I am going to go to the questions. The first one is, how can we add a reoccurring expense? And so I'm assuming that you're asking if this is something that is not appearing through one of the accounts you've linked, but is something you want to do manually. So maybe every month you, I don't know, what's a good example?
You pay cash to...
Okay, you may have a gardener and you pay cash to them every month, and it's for upkeep of the gardening associated with your business. And so the short answer is no, you can't set up a reoccurring manual expense to be added. You'll just unfortunately have to go in and add that manually. But the good thing is, once you've added it the first time and categorized it as whatever that particular category is, then all future ones should receive that same category. Okay, so moving on, the next question is, how do you start a company and categorize for startup capitalization? So to make sure I understand that question, I think you're asking if when you start up a question and the owner puts in some startup money into the business and you want that reflected, you can actually do that through a manual entry. So here I'm on expenses, but I can add a manual entry for expenses. So let me cancel out of this. So add a transaction. I can give it a name and description. I'll wait for that to come up on your screen. And then under categorize, you can do this under non-business. I thought the list of... Okay, I need to do this through the income tab.
But I think what you would probably do is you wouldn't want to count that as income if it's startup capital. You'd probably count that within outright as something like a transfer in, meaning that money was transferred into outright. It did not come into outright as income, and then based on it being a transfer in, it wouldn't affect your profit and loss and how you see the performance of your business.
Okay, I know for some of you that your screen may be refreshing, but I'm on the income tab now and I'm adding a new manual transaction. So as Laura said, when you add this transaction, there's actually a category called owner's contribution or equity, in which case you can record the amount of money that the owner contributed for the startup of the business. And then when you pull that money, pay that money back to yourself, you can use the sister category on the expense side, which was the owner's draw. And like Laura said, either of those categories will not be added to your business income or expenses because they're not part of your business expenses or income. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Oh, okay, I think it's very similar. How do you start a company and categorize the startup capitalization expenses for tax purposes?
In the same way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that was from the same person. So a question, how do most businesses using Outright handle the transaction portion? And I'm not really sure what you mean by the transaction portion. Yeah, if you could, Angela, send in additional comment to clarify what transaction portion is, that would be great. So let me move on for now. And Laura asks, my bank is not listed, which means I need to manually enter everything. Is there a way to upload transactions? Yes, there is a way to upload transactions. So you'll need to go to your bank account, log into your bank account, and export the transactions you want to import, and then here I'm in the income tab, so I'll just do an example here from here. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the income tab or all the way to the bottom of the expense tab, and I'll wait for that to refresh on your screen. You will see an import button in the bottom right, and if you click on import, you'll see instructions for how to import your data into Outright.
And the gist of importing data into Outright is basically in a Excel spreadsheet format. You would need to label the header rows to match the rows headers in Outright, and there's detailed instructions on how to do that. It is a little bit of work, but once you get everything in Outright, you'll be able to see everything categorized and in reports just like it was imported automatically.
Okay. And then the next one, can you discuss your security to prevent hacking into your system and thus my banking information? So the imports or data import system that we use is the same one that the major banks use. So it is pretty secure because the banks, or it's the same security as the major banks use.
So if you use online banking, Outright uses the same level of security and the same methods of encryption that your bank uses for online banking.
Yes.
Which is an industry standard.
Yep. And then once it's in Outright, here, I think I'm going to go to the Outright website, and there is a page that discusses what security we have once the data is in Outright. So I know it won't be up on your screen yet, but essentially I'm going to outright.com, clicking on how it works in the top right of your screen, and then once you get to how it works, on the left side there's a link that says security you can trust, and then this talks about the different security measures that we have implemented on the Outright servers.
Right.
Okay, so let me go to the next one. How to determine expenses and profit when selling one's own items.
I think this is a bit of a tricky question. So if I understand this correctly, I think what you're asking is if you have perhaps stuff at home that you are no longer using, whether it's household goods or clothing or tools or something like that, and you want to sell that, how do you determine the value of that? One of the ways, the IRS does have some guidelines that they provide as a starting point, and I believe it's it's something called, and we can email this out, but it's something called estimating charitable good donations. They have some guidelines around how to go about estimating the value of a particular item, and it's everything from what somebody would be willing to pay for it, to what if you were to buy the item new today, what would be a reasonable replacement value that somebody would pay. So there's a number of factors that the IRS provides guidelines on in terms of how to determine that value. It's definitely a bit of a tricky thing, though.
Okay, and then the next one is writing checks, related to writing checks and paying bills. How do Outright clients handle that? I like the functionality of Outright, but I'd like to know how others handle check writing, etc. So I think the question is, if you write checks to pay your bills related to your business, how does that get handled within Outright?
Yeah.
And so if you have your checking account linked to Outright, then on a nightly basis, Outright is going and pulling all the transactions from your bank. So when a check clears, a check clearing transaction pops up in your bank account, it's going to be pulled into Outright that night, and then you can go in and see, is it categorized against the right category, and if not, do that recategorization that we showed earlier.
Right, and it might come into Outright, because Outright doesn't know where you wrote the check to and what bill you paid with it necessarily. It might come in as a transfer, and then you would have, as Lynette said, you'd have to recategorize that to the appropriate expense category and then name it.
Yep. And then, of course, if it's a checking account that you do not have linked to Outright, you can go in and manually add that transaction in. Okay, we're at the end of the question list. If anyone has any, oh, one more. Okay, it's a clarification on the question we just answered. So she's clarifying, so you still need to manually write or print checks and input into Outright. Is that correct? So yes, yes to part of that question. If you're writing checks, printing checks, you still need to manually write and print checks. And the part that Outright does is it pulls the transaction into Outright and records it as an expense. But you would initially have to have written and provided the check to whoever your supplier was.
Right. So, and just to be super clear, Outright is not a transactional account, so you cannot write a check per se out of Outright. You would still have to do that out of whatever bank account or checking account that you use. You would still write the check manually, and you would send it and pay the bill however you normally do that. And then at the end of each night, when Outright imported the transactions from that bank account, you would see that check quote clearing come through. But Outright isn't a transactional program where you can write checks from or print checks from like you can within QuickBooks.
Okay, let's see if there's any more questions. Okay, one more. If we import from Amazon, how do we differentiate between personal and expense items manually? So if it's an Amazon seller account, Outright is going to assume that all the transactions being imported are part of your business and then provide some kind of category. If you do have some personal transaction items in there, though I can't imagine what they would be, you would have to manually change the expense and then teach Outright that that is a personal expense.
Right. Because the account that you would link to Outright is your Amazon seller's account.
Right. It's right. It's the
So,
Amazon seller account that's being linked, not
your Amazon consumer account that you make purchases from. Right.
Okay. Any more questions out there? Okay, so I'm going to give out, I don't have this up on the screen, but I'm going to open You know what? We're going to send a confirmation email in about tomorrow with a link to the recorded version of this webinar, and then I'll also provide Laura and my email address. Oh, actually, what Laura's doing is she's going to type into the chat window both of our email addresses in case anyone has questions and wants to reach out to us later. We'd be happy to hear from you. And then tomorrow you will receive a link to this recorded webinar, and also with some short bite-sized how-to videos. If there's any particular part of using Outright that you still have questions on, we do have a set of videos that address particular functions like how to categorize and recategorize, how to link an account, and so forth. Oh, okay. Actually, I will send our email addresses right now via, yeah.
And feel free, we would love to hear your feedback both on how this went and the content, and if it was useful for you in getting started with Outright, and if you still have questions. I think clearly one of the things that we saw was the delay in typing on our screen and then what you saw on your screen. Obviously that's something that we would want to figure out going forward. So any feedback you have and any additional topics that you would like to see or participate in, learn more about, definitely send suggestions on additional webinar topics, because we want to make sure that we can help all of you use Outright in a way that's valuable for your business.
Okay, thank you, everybody.